Hey everyone, welcome to another interview with one of our great global Azure and DevOps and GitHub folks today. Today I'm joined by Rob, all the way from the US. I'm going to let Rob introduce himself. Hey Rob, and over to you.
Awesome. It's great to be here. I'm excited to get to speak at Serverless Days. I'm Rob Richardson. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a friend of Redgate. And I'm really excited. I get to talk about leveling up your DevOps with GitHub Actions and Azure Functions.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I know we were just talking about it before we came on air. That whole GitHub Actions space is really starting to explode, and it opens up a lot of opportunities for people who maybe traditionally haven't had access to CI and CD in their environments, and now they can make use of a hosted product right there in GitHub if they're already working with the GitHub offer for their source control. Now they have actually have access to that CI and CD capabilities as well. So your talk for ANZ Serverless Days is going to be about GitHub Actions, but there's more to it than just GitHub Actions, right? From what I can see from the title.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to talk a lot about GitHub Actions, but this is a no slides demo. I start my talk with an empty folder and a terminal, and we begin from there. We start by scaffolding out an Azure function, and then we'll add a README, commit that, and push that up to GitHub. Once the content is up on GitHub, we'll spin into the GitHub Actions dashboard and build out a DevOps pipeline. What's really cool about this DevOps pipeline is the designer on one side will help us if we're new to the DevOps space building out CI pipelines. But if we're familiar with CI pipelines, then we can just jump into a Bash shell and do all the content that we need right inside one of the actions. Once we've got our DevOps pipeline built out, we're going to push that into place, and it just becomes part of our source code, and then we'll push go. That will do really cool things because it will build our Azure function. It will publish that project up to Azure, and then we'll view the logs and the function there in Azure. And all of that happens automatically. Change some content in your repository, push that up, and automatically GitHub Actions will grab that content, validate that it works correctly using any test that you've got, and publish the next version up to Azure as well.
Yeah, it's like I touched on before, and like you've just sort of covered, right? You almost start to take these capabilities for granted, right? I think for many folks out there that are maybe watching this, maybe that's not their reality today, right? Is that certainly my experience longer term in my career was that continuous integration, in the early days, and more recently the continuous deployment was very much an afterthought, for people building software, regardless of where it was being deployed to, right? And I think now with cloud becoming quite ubiquitous and Azure being very popular, we're starting to see the benefits of the move into those environments because it unlocks the opportunity to rapidly stand up these continuous integration and continuous deployment solutions in hosted environments like this. Is that the experience that you're having with the work that you're doing? Are you seeing that as a benefit? And what's been your experience going through this journey as well?
Yeah, most definitely. What's really cool is that for the majority of projects that you'll host on GitHub, you'll get enough GitHub Actions content to be able to build out your solution forever for free. And that is really great. I started in the early days using cruisecontrol.net and building out DevOps pipelines in Cruise Control. And that was fun, but it was a challenge. And so one project that I was actually tasked with, they didn't have any concept of DevOps and continuous integration, continuous delivery. So their task, for the most part, was production is doing something goofy. Let's remote into the production box, pull up Visual Studio on that box, and just start hacking at the code until production works. Did you remember to commit that? Oh, yeah, I didn't. Sorry. And that was kind of their workflow, was they just kept hacking at production. Of course, uptime being what it is, that wasn't the case when you're debugging production in place. So the cool part about a DevOps pipeline is you can get that level of confidence. When you have even one test that gets you to the point that you have a bit of confidence on your system. Now you can start to iterate, build dozens or hundreds of tests to really validate all of the edges, and now refactor mercilessly, push that code up. If your build succeeds, you have a high confidence that it works in production. And in cases where it fails, well, that's a great opportunity to build a test that will validate that condition. And half a dozen times of fixing or building additional tests for fixes in production, and you'll have a really robust suite of tests. And the cool part, given a DevOps pipeline, those tests will run every time. What's really sweet about GitHub Actions is that it is a really elegant mechanism for building anything. Now, in this talk, we're specifically focused on Azure Functions, but I've done similar talks where I'm building out websites published to Azure Web Apps and containers published to Kubernetes. And so you can also build mobile apps or desktop apps. And GitHub Actions has hosted mechanisms for building pretty much any type of content. We'll get to poke at it where we'll start with an Ubuntu box, but you could also start with a Windows box or a Mac box and get it to build and deploy all the content that you need to. DevOps pipelines are a really good way to gain confidence in your product so that you don't have those, oops, sorry, I just deployed a thing that took down the everything. Let your DevOps pipeline do that. Machines are cheaper than people now in most cases. So let the machines do that exhaustive suite of tests. And once it's good enough, now deploy it to production.
I do love merciless refactoring as a statement in there. I just have visions of somebody standing with a big samurai sword somewhere about to embark on, a code rewriting frenzy with that confidence attached to, the automated testing suite running in the background. And I do like, you mentioned there, obviously the talk you're doing is very much focused on Azure Functions and deployment to cloud, but a space I often see overlooked in the industry is around mobile application development, right? I see a lot of teams that struggle because they have, piecemeal hosted services that, they do source code with one provider and then they do continuous integration, if they have any at all, either with, another provider, or they have a Mac box on a desktop in their team environment that is their build host that, is watching the repository and building it. And then the idea that you might actually take that build, run some automated tests on it in a suite somewhere up in the cloud, it doesn't really even get that far in many cases. And if they are doing that, there's then the next step of publishing it into something like a test flight, for your testers to actually be able to get the latest release of that app, and then finally publishing it into the App Store for App Store review, right? So, and that's feasible today. That's not just a pie in the sky. I've got to pick and choose, lots of different providers to do that. Is like you can come and use GitHub Actions or VS App Center to do a lot of that stuff in the mobile space right now. And it doesn't matter whether you're building for Android or iOS, it exists right now. So I think, to your point, that confidence can exist across any platform and any team, utilizing the sort of the integrated experience that you get with something like GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, whatever it might be. It's there today. And I think once you go down that path, it's very hard to ever go back. Like I've brought people on to teams where, we started with a file new project. And the first thing I said is, well, by the end of today, we're just going to have that file new project with something in it. And then we're going to have a pipeline set up that's going to at least, compile it. Maybe it'll run just one test. And then maybe it'll deploy that, artifact somewhere, whether it's into, a package repository for other teams to use, or it's just a hello world being deployed into a app service web app. It doesn't matter. And often you get this kind of look from people. It's like, oh yeah, come on. Where I came from, that was like a multi-week journey to go on to get the right teams to provision the right resources, or we didn't have enough licensing to cover that sort of stuff. Whereas today, it's almost that easy that it should just be a part of the standard workflow for developers. It's like, well, I'm starting that file new project, rather than just looking at my artifact and my package and my solution. I need to take that longer view of, well, once I've built and packaged it, I then need to do the tests for it. I need to then take that tested, known quantity artifact and then deploy it somewhere. And I think that's the change I see people go on when they start to work with these sorts of tools. Is that your experience?
Yeah, definitely. And what's really cool about that, as you begin a project, file new, get the DevOps pipeline built out real fast, run one test, build one project, deploy to one spot. That's perfect because you've just validated the entire experience. And now you just need to add more to it. Let's add more pages to our website, or let's add more screens to our mobile app, or let's add more features to our API, or let's add more unit tests to validate that functions work correctly. Let's add integration tests, perhaps with Cypress or another tool. And let's get a feel for how we get all of these pieces to work together. Once we pave that initial path, then adding more to it is easy. And what I hope to accomplish then in this talk is to show how easy it is to get started with that piece. Quickly provision some stuff in the Azure portal, quickly build up a DevOps pipeline that'll get content into that into Azure, and then code some stuff and make that happen. And I just walked the journey backwards, but we're going to actually create some stuff. We're going to build that DevOps pipeline. We're going to publish it to Azure, and it is that easy.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, look, Rob, thank you very much for your time today for this short chat. We'll put your details up on screen over the end of this video so people can find you online. If you're watching the video before 4th of September, please make sure to grab a ticket at anz.serverlessdays.io so you can get access to our great content on the day and also see Rob's talk, which will be available on demand with the content on our YouTube channel. Rob, I want to thank you for your time today, and let's chat again soon.
Most definitely. And if you're watching this after September 4th, watch the video because it is a really great talk, or reach out to me on Twitter at Rob_Rich, or grab this talk at robrich.org/presentations. That'll get you straight to the spot where once the video is posted, you'll be able to watch it straight from there. It's so much fun getting to speak with you today, and I'm really looking forward to the conference.
All right. Thanks for your time, Rob.